right, I'm here with John Wilmes over from RealGM.com, one of our favorites around here. John, thanks so much for jumping on.
Thanks for
We're
having me.
recording. You're welcome. We're recording this after the Knicks sweep the Cavs. They're going to the NBA Finals. I got plenty of time to talk about the NBA Finals. I got plenty of time to talk about basketball on the court. I don't want to do that right now. I want to talk about the offseason with you because there's so many things going on, things that are percolating, things bubbling under the surface, things that we got to keep an eye on here. And maybe more now than ever, we have to keep an eye on the Cleveland Cavaliers because, yes, they finally make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. The first time since LeBron left in 2018. They make it here. It's Donovan Mitchell's first time out of the second round. James Harden makes it to the conference finals. Kenny Atkinson makes it to the conference finals. They win 2 Game 7s to get there. In many ways, you could look at this Cavs playoff run and say, look, they did accomplish a lot. But then it doesn't feel that way. And I'm trying to figure out why it doesn't feel that way. And I think the number one reason is, well, they just got embarrassed by the Knicks. They didn't even look like they deserved to be on the same court, despite the fact that they may have won 2 or 3 of these games analytically. They lost all of these games by the scoreboard, and embarrassingly so. And that Game 4 performance in particular, well, it's really started at the end of Game 3, where it felt like they gave up at the end of that game, and then they really just didn't have it in Game 4 whatsoever. And I think there's a lot of questions now for this Cavaliers team that has the highest payroll in the NBA, which is probably the other reason why this feels so disappointing. And kind of also bleak, because when you have a payroll as high as this one is, they're the only team in the league that operated over the second apron this season. It just doesn't really feel like there's a bunch of outs. And they already did the coaching change thing from a couple of years ago. Can you really do that again? They make the big swing for Harden at the deadline, which was definitely a short-term move, which I liked at the time. And now I just don't know what they do. What would you do if you're the Cavs? And I guess we'll start with the basic question of, do you just try to run this thing back, maybe get under the second apron, but mostly run this core back? Or is based on what we just saw in the Eastern Conference Finals, do you think that there's a need for more bigger changes?
Well, first of all, Kenny Atkinson saying we won 2 of those 3 as games analytically or whatever. People got to stop saying stuff like that. Like, by now it's clear that like nobody likes that. It doesn't play well. You can say that stuff internally if you need to or whatever, but like the only thing you should say publicly is like we haven't been good enough, and just express accountability. James Harden also said, I feel like you just got swept, and he's like, I feel like we're the better team. What are you talking about? You just lost by 40. Like, no, you're not the better team.
The real problem with that is the lack of credibility that these players have. Harden has not won a championship. Yeah. Who are you to tell us that you're the better team? You don't know what the better team is. You haven't been on the better team in a very long time. And with Kenny Atkinson, it's very similar. It's like, hey, I remember Greg Popovich saying similar things. It wasn't quite like analytically nerd-coded as the way that Kenny Atkinson said it. But in 2013, when they were losing to the Heat in the finals, he was like, look, our process is good. We feel like we're getting good shots. Sometimes you make them, sometimes you don't. But that's Greg Popovich with Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, guys who have won championships. When they say it, it's like, okay, you've earned the right to say that. When it's a group that has failed time and time again, just hit the same wall over and over again, being like, I think we're the better team and we've won these games analytically, nobody cares about winning these analytically. Like, you actually need to win these games realistically.
Yeah, and in analytics, they work a lot better over a larger sample size. You're talking about a best-of-7 series. Like, it doesn't matter what the analytics say. You have to win 4 of 7 games. And if you've lost 4 of 4 instead, it doesn't matter what your index says. Maybe the point you're trying to make would bear out over 80 games, but that's not what you have. So,
well, let's start there. I mean, are they that bad? Like, are they so what? How? Because look, the point of we got good shots, but they didn't go in, I think is a fair point. Maybe he should have just said that. We're getting good shots. We got to keep taking these shots. Okay, maybe there's something to that.
Yeah.
But like, if the margin really is getting beat by 20 plus points per game, the way that the margin was in the Eastern Conference Finals, then yeah, you got to tear the whole thing down. I don't think there's any question, because now the Knicks are the team to beat, and you're nowhere even close near them. I don't think the margin is that far away. I don't think they're the better team. I don't think they're as good. I think there's some major problems that they got to figure out, but I don't think the margin is quite that either.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's just one of these teams that we shouldn't really judge in terms of whether they win a championship or not. I don't think it's impossible for this version of the team to win the championship, but I think it's almost impossible. And I think that, anything that they might do to actually win a championship, to improve from what they are to that better thing that wins a championship, is also almost impossible. They don't really have the asset goods to just go make a move that's going to make them a champion. I don't see what that would be. So the question is really just like, are you content with being like 5th to 8th best team in the league? Are you, right? Or or are you so discontent with that you have to like blow it up and try something else? And I think the fact that I don't think anybody really likes this, right? It just doesn't feel good. And it's like, what do you do with a team that is pretty good, not a champion, but pretty good, but kind of just makes everybody feel bad, right? If it was a newer thing, like it was the previous season when they actually lost kind of badly in the second round and didn't even make it this far, it produced a lot more good feelings, right? Despite being a technically less successful season. So ultimately, if it's, as you said, gonna get really expensive, they're gonna go into the luxury tax and all this. Like, do you keep a team like this together when costs like that start to hit? To me, probably not. I don't really know what you do. I don't know what Evan Mobley's market value is, for instance. I just mentioned him first because he's, theoretically the guy you would get the most for if you were to trade him, right? And it would be the boldest way to do a pivot. Donovan Mitchell, I think, just getting older, maybe he could be the perfect piece for a very specific team, but I don't know that anybody wants to go and get him to be their first or second best player at this point, given the cost that's going to come with him. James Harden is old as hell. So I just don't, they don't have some incredible rookie or second year player who would be dynamite on the trade market. So I just think this is where they are, basically. And I don't really know that there is much to do. If they want to get under the luxury tax, there are all kinds of ways they could do that without losing any of their core players, I'm sure. But yeah, they just got to hope they have some kind of miracle, basically, right? And it was kind of not miraculous that they even got to this point, right? But they certainly got lucky with, Darius Garland being really good after they drafted him, Evan Mobley being really good after they drafted him, and then, trading for Donovan Mitchell at the right time. All of a sudden, this is a team that is maybe a play-in team, and then it's like, oh, now you're one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. I'm like, that in itself is an accomplishment. Going further than that, and getting a championship, like, I don't think that level of luck has been there for them, right? You look at the teams that are most likely to win the champion, or the only teams that could win the championship right now. All of them have at least one extraordinary strike of luck going for them, right? SGA being not exactly an afterthought in the Paul George trade, but like certainly not the centerpiece of it. In retrospect, he is, right? Nobody thought he was an MVP, let alone a 2-time MVP, and he became one. That's extreme luck. Getting the number 1 pick when Victor Wembanyama is available, that's extreme luck. Jalen Brunson being a guy who's not even a max player, who you just sign straight up as a free agent and then becomes basically MVP level, that's extreme luck, right? Cavs haven't had anything like that, right? And I think and we could just play this game all day. Like, all the champions have some kind of extreme lightning bolt of luck.
I think the closest thing they have to that is trading for Donovan Mitchell, and then Donovan Mitchell being the kind of player who says, I'm not going to try to go to New York or Miami or LA or one of these other. I'm actually going to sign the extension here, with no real indication that he was going to do that. That's the closest thing they have to that. It's been 4 years now of the Donovan Mitchell experience. This is the first time that they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals with Donovan Mitchell, and the first time Donovan Mitchell has made it out of the second round, dating back to his time in Utah. But it took 2 Game 7s to get there. And like, this could have ended earlier, right? And I don't
Oh,
mean
yeah.
to take credit away. You know, the Cleveland goes into Detroit and wins the game 7. Like, that is an accomplishment. That was a hard thing to do, and they did it, and they get credit for that. But it also just it still feels flimsy. And for the most expensive payroll in the league, this roster never quite feels right.
Hmm.
And I think a lot, and it's been a conversation for 2 years with this group of like, what's missing with this group? What is it? Why doesn't it work? Because nobody, Jared Allen, all star, Evan Mobley, all star, Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, all stars, probably future Hall of Famers. Like, these are really, really great players. Why isn't this working? Even at, that 5th spot, they're just rotating through with floor spacers. It's either Strus or Merrill or Dean Wade. Like, why doesn't this work? And I honestly don't really know the answer to that. All I know is it doesn't really work. And maybe we're getting to that point where that question doesn't even matter because we've reached the end point of this core anyway. It does feel though like you can't hold this thing together. I don't know how you can possibly come into next year and say we got swept, we're still really expensive and we're just going to keep this going because it was so up and down for this Cavs group over a couple of years where now the sample size is big enough of we need to make some kind of change. Now, I think the degree to those changes could vary, right? First of all, the big question is James Harden. What are you going to do with him? He's got the player option. The expectation around the league is that, hey, the Cavs trade for him because they basically promised him the extension, that it might already just basically be a done deal. But until ink is on paper, I don't know how you walk out of that series and say, this is probably the right way to go. Now, Donovan Mitchell was a little hurt at the end of the series. They were obviously laboring. They played every other day for the last 3 weeks or whatever it was. So maybe they're just tired. But I do understand the need to have both, like, 2 lead ball handlers if you're going to try to make a run. Like, I understand that. But Harden at this age, I just don't know how you
he's
commit to
old,
that.
man.
He's old, and if you do commit to that, it's going to be expensive. You're going to remain expensive, and then you might be forced to make a decision on Donovan Mitchell. And then all of a sudden, you're looking around in a year, and you're like, how do we go from Mitchell and Garland to now just James Harden? And now we were forced to trade Donovan Mitchell because his team got so expensive. So that's the James Harden question is one big one that they have to figure out. And maybe there's nothing to figure out. Maybe it's something that they've already sort of figured out, and they got to abide by it. The other one is, I guess, Jared Allen. He's a guy that I think a lot of teams in the league would like to have. Could you trade him and get something back and mix it up, commit to Mobley at the 5? I don't even know if it's the right move. I just know it's a different thing. And it just feels like they have to do something differently here.
Yeah, I mean, even so, the James Harden trade, it basically worked, right? I know people love the jokes about how he's a playoff shrinker and all that. And jokes are fundamentally true. But at the same time, like, they don't win that Pistons series without him. He was definitely the difference. They needed 2 really reliable ball handlers, very high usage ball handlers to win that game 7. Kenny Atkinson was saying their main reason they won, their biggest strategic pivot, was just getting the ball away from Azar Thompson, like not allowing him as a defender to be anywhere near the ball. You need 2 really high usage, really reliable ball handlers to do that. Would a healthy Darius Garland have been up to the challenge against that physical Detroit team? I don't think so, right? So, I mean, technically it worked. They went further than they've gone with James Harden. There just wasn't any further for them to go. Jared Allen, I don't know. Like, what are you really going to get for him?
Yeah.
I just, with any of these trades, it's like, how are you actually going to get better with any of these trades as opposed to just being like
Jared Allen,
this
you could
again.
trade hypothetically to the Lakers for some cap relief and a first round and a future first. And maybe it's protected for, I don't know. It depends on the new rules. Maybe that's something that you can get. But that's a step back. You are taking a step back, but maybe you ultimately have to take that step back to take a step forward in a couple of years. But then you've got the Donovan Mitchell extension hanging over all of this. And you've got Donovan Mitchell at the end of that game saying, I'm here. I want to come back. Like, he said he's committed to Cleveland. Now we'll see, right? That's one thing to say at post game. It's another thing to say that when you're presented with an extension. And, all indications are that the Cavs will offer him the extension. I don't know how, if you're Donovan Mitchell, you sit there and be like, yeah, definitely signing this. Like, unless you just want the long-term security, which if he does, okay, go for it. But I don't know how you look at that, how you look at the way that the season played out and can say, like, yeah, I think we can eventually win a championship here. Just, I guess it depends on what Donovan Mitchell wants at that point.
I mean, a big part of this is just Donovan Mitchell's ceiling too, right?
Yep.
Like, so yeah, okay, he probably does want to stay there because I don't think any other teams are dying to pay him a maximum salary at this point, right? They see him as a guy who's going to be on the wrong side of 30, who's always been a little smaller. Like, how well is he really going to age, right? So for him to play this story where it's like, oh, I'm loyal to Cleveland. It's like, well, they're the best place for you to be, right? They're the team that's going to pay you. That's still going to pay you the most, right? I don't know if he might be able to find one or two others, but who knows that would be any better for him, right? So it's not like Donovan Mitchell is looking at the whole league and it's like his oyster, right? He's just sort of staying where he's at because it's not clear that he has any better options, right? And it's not clear that the Cavs have any better options. They just are what they are ultimately, right? The only thing that would change it is, again, some kind of miracle. I don't know if they have a pick or what their pick is in this year's draft, but maybe they get extremely lucky, and they have an all-star on their hands out of nowhere.
Well, the other, so they don't. They have the 29th pick in this draft because of some sort of deal with San Antonio. So that's not, you're not going to get anything there. I mean, the name that's out there is Giannis, and maybe this is a good way to sort of segue into the Giannis conversation. We've heard, is there a Mobley for Giannis type of package out there, type of deal out there to be done? That seems extreme. And the other name that's out there is LeBron James. Are you able to convince LeBron to come to you for something cheap, or is some sort of way to go get him? Is there a way to potentially go get both Giannis and LeBron? And now you've got all these guys. And I don't know that that's a better situation. I just know it's a different situation, and it kind of feels exciting. But those would be the other names. So let's go to Giannis here. We'll play him more time to talk about Cleveland. But, I think Cleveland has to be on the list. If they're going to be acting out of desperation, would they actually move Mobley? And if they are willing to move Mobley, that's kind of interesting to me if I'm Milwaukee. Like, I can either get Mobley or I can flip Mobley for something else or whatever. But when you look at Giannis, there's also reports, I think it was Bill Simmons who said earlier this week that Giannis really likes the idea of playing in Boston or Miami. I look at the Giannis thing, and it just feels like the market isn't going to be where I think the Bucks hoped that it would be. Certainly at the trade deadline when they decided they didn't move him, thinking that there'd be better offers in the summer, and now all indications are like, no, you actually might have had better offers at the trade deadline than you might get this offseason when Giannis is older and coming off of even more injuries than he was coming off of at the deadline.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to think about the Giannis situation. There's just so many different layers of like media management and perception. And what it kind of shakes out to at the moment is like, this idea that he wants to live on the East Coast because the flight back to Greece is faster.
Yep.
And it's like, that seems like, just from the way it's been reported, like relatively plausible. But at the same time, it's like, seriously? Because the flight is only going to be, a couple hours longer if you're living deeper into America. And there's a lot of teams that you might want to be interested in going to. But if he really does feel that way, then he's already killing the Bucks' leverage in negotiating, right? And anytime one of these big players has like a list or whatever, like a team they really want to go to, like, it obviously hurts the negotiating leverage, right? And the Bucks aren't going to trade him until they get blown away, right? So what they really need to do is get some play these info wars a little better, right? Get some information out there where it's like, hey, maybe Giannis would go anywhere. He just wants to win, right? Like that story out there. And then I do think that there is a potential for a bidding war. I do think there are quite a few teams that are more than a small step away from a championship. And Giannis, if you get him healthy at the right time, is more than a small step. He's a huge step as an addition to your team, right? So I think if anything, if it's going to go even close to the way that the Bucks want it to go, we're still multiple stories away from like the real market developing.
Well, I partly wonder if that's what's kind of happening with this Boston Miami thing.
Yeah.
Because those are two teams in the East Coast that could presumably, you have a Miami team that's desperate for a star, and you have a Boston team that is kind of 2 years of disappointment after winning a championship, and there's this big Jaylen Brown question. And part of me just wonders if somebody on the Bucks side is playing it out this way. Uh, but I also understand that I think the so I heard the thing about wanting to be a short flight away from Greece. I heard that back at the trade deadline. And I was like, that's a kind of random bit of information. Why am I hearing this? And the way that I heard it was very like through the grapevine and kind of just like, hey, here's a funny detail. Isn't this kind of interesting? Like, we never hear about this when it comes to stars being traded of like, hey, tell me about the airport in that city. Like, you just don't hear about that. And I think that's almost why, if I were to guess, why this has become such a big story, is it's kind of that unique detail of like, well, that's kind of a weird thing. Let's talk about that weird thing. Where I think ultimately Giannis wants to be on the in the Eastern Conference because it's just easier to get to the championship. It's easier to get to the NBA Finals out of the Eastern. It's the path of least resistance at this point. And if that's just the case, then I totally get that for Giannis or any other star who's looking at the Spurs and the Thunder in the West in the West Conference and saying, you know what? If I don't have to deal with them until the NBA Finals, great. And then I only have to deal with one of them. And so if that's what Giannis is ultimately thinking, then I don't have a problem with it, even if there's a little bit of a short flight thing going on there for Greece. But I do think it's Miami and Boston that make the most sense. If Boston really wants to upend things and they feel like... And the only way I think Boston does this, or should do this, or even would do this, is if Jaylen Brown comes to them and says, I'm ready. I'm ready to get my own team. Move me. If Jaylen Brown doesn't do that, I have a really hard time seeing Boston make this particular trade and getting a lot older and a lot more injury prone when the whole utility of Jaylen Brown all year was he was the one that wasn't hurt. That was what was so great about Jaylen Brown. And then you're going to be banking on Tatum coming off of, by the way, aggravating something at the end of the playoffs, at the end of their playoff run, and obviously off of the Achilles, and then Giannis coming off of a bunch of these injuries. It feels a little too risky for me if I'm Boston, and I don't feel like I'm so far away that I need to take that risk. It just kind of feels like I need to do things on the margin if I'm the Celtics, whereas the Heat, they're the team that are obviously acting out of maybe a point of desperation here after missing the playoffs entirely, and then 2 years in a row being like just wiped off the floor in the first round.
Well, the Heat one, I mean, I'll get back to it, but my big bullet point on that is just it boils down to the psychology of Pat Riley, basically. He just wants a big star. But the Celtics one, I mean, I think we kind of lost track of the story of the Celtics offseason last summer, which was that they were taking a step back. And then they had this unexpectedly successful regular season with a lot of, nobodies, not true nobodies, but guys that we mostly hadn't heard of before. Overperforming, and then that fell apart in the playoffs because that's what happens to teams like that in the playoffs usually. And so let's get back to where we were when they were getting rid of Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis and losing Al Horford, with Tatum probably going to be out for the year, right? It was like, okay, this is the Celtics team that has won a championship, that has gone deep many years in a row. The financial toll is starting to catch up to them as well as the physical toll. They're taking a step back now, right? So I think that's kind of still where they are really. And the only way to get back into the picture as a true title contender, in my opinion, is making another huge swing, right? And so you just kind of have to think about it in terms of, how long is your vision for this? Because if you want to just be as good as possible forever, you don't make this Giannis trade, right? But if you look at it as like, well, title contention is rare. We should seize on things when they are within reach. And if we trade for Giannis, that's our best chance at winning another title next year and the year after. I don't know. But then after that, we know that we're going to have a long hangover, right? So, I mean, it comes down to a philosophical approach. Right. I mean, I do think that, I don't think this is a very hot take that I think that Giannis is better than Jaylen Brown, especially if he's going to be healthy. And I don't know about the compatibility of him and Tatum. I'm also frankly concerned that Derek White is getting kind of old. So there's a lot of problems they have that wouldn't be solved by trading for Giannis. But I mean, he does make them more of a title contender, I believe, if they make the trade. So I don't know where the new owner's head is at, where Brad Stevens' head is at. But it makes sense if you're trying to win the championship next year, basically. But if you're thinking long term, no, it does not. It does not make a ton of sense.
It's a great point, and I guess we'll find out. The idea of taking that step back was to kind of just try to lengthen the runway on this, but maybe based off of what you saw, or again, the big sort of monkey wrench in all of this is if Jaylen Brown just goes to Brad Stevens and says, I want my own team, I'd prefer to get traded, and at that point, you kind of just have to evaluate the best options. But I still just feel like Tatum and Brown together is probably their best bet to kind of straddle the line and do both. Where we can conceivably make the finals every year with these two guys as our best guys, and they're young and they're homegrown, and we feel good, and we got them both under contract, and we feel good about it. The other name that's out there is Kawhi Leonard. And we're already getting reporting that maybe the Clippers would prefer good players as opposed to a boatload of draft picks for Kawhi. It sounds like this is a team that wants to remain competitive, at least in the short term, while they're building with Garland and some of these other guys that they have. I think Kawhi is really interesting. There were points in this season, long stretches of the season, where he looked like one of the best 5 guys in the league. And then the thing that always happens with Kawhi happens, where he's just not available to end the season. And you get on the trade machine, John, and you're just like, where do I put this guy? And I just don't know where to put this guy. I've got a couple of sort of loose ideas that are kind of fun and interesting, but in terms of teams that want to get into the Kawhi business, especially with all this aspiration stuff still not yet resolved, I just have a really hard time figuring out where he ends up. And if the Clippers do get rid of him, it just feels like with all of this stuff, they have so little leverage in a potential trade. It's sort of like we kind of know you're ready to wipe your hands of Kawhi. You get to a point for the Clippers is like, is it even worth it to trade this guy? I don't know. It depends on how badly maybe they want to turn the page on all of it. But is there a team to you that makes sense for him?
Well, so he's got just 1 year left in his contract, $50 million, something like that. So you don't know what would happen after a year of Kawhi. But obviously, there is already a blueprint for mercenary 1 year Kawhi, right? He's not peak Kawhi like he was on the Raptors, but he was shockingly good last year, actually, given his injury history. I think everybody was surprised by what he was able to put together this past season. I don't know. I'm not like a super detail-oriented trade machine guy, but just broad strokes, Pistons, like he's kind of exactly if he's healthy, he's kind of exactly what you need. They just needed another guy so badly. And they do have a lot of young talent that is kind of redundant. So they could spare some of it. Maybe, you do throw picks in the deal, but you also have Ron Holland, Isaiah Stewart, Marcus Sasser. Obviously I think Thompson and Cade, and I would still say Jalen Duren, untouchable. I know that he didn't have the greatest playoffs, but he's young, and I think he'll get better at that. So those are 3 guys are untouchable. He would basically replace Tobias Harris for you, who you just let walk. I don't know if you have to shed more salary to fit his contract in. And I doubt he wants to go there, to be honest. He seems like such a California or nothing guy. But it doesn't matter. He's under contract and he's only got 1 year left. And I'm sure he would, lock in on a team that he knew he could win on. So I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
It's also a contract year, right? And so if Kawhi wants to sign another deal, he'll be extra motivated to do something there. I've obviously, we could talk about the obvious, like Golden State is always going to be big game hunting. I do wonder what Miami would do if they strike out on Giannis. Like, would they just say, you know what, 1 year of Kawhi, figure it out. Maybe that's sort of a bridge solution to some of our problems here. Detroit was on my list. The other team that's been out there is Minnesota. Like, is there like a Randall-based package that they can move? It just, to get to that 50 million number for Minnesota, it would take so much of their depth away. Because it would be, it would have to be Randall plus Gobert, or like, I don't think they would move McDaniels, but it would be like those 2 of their big salary players outside of Ant. I just don't see them depleting their depth to that degree for a guy who's as unreliable as Kawhi is. So I saw Minnesota out there a lot. It just doesn't quite make enough sense for me. You can make a similar argument for Denver, where it's like, okay, well, could you move like Cam Johnson plus? Well, it's like, okay, well, that plus is either Jamal Murray or Aaron Gordon. And I just don't see them doing that for Kawhi. So Minnesota and Denver don't quite, even if you can argue they might be a Kawhi away from raising their ceiling to the degree that they need to raise it, it's just, it would deplete so much depth and be so risky that I just don't see those teams doing it. I have three other teams, 2.5 other teams that were kind of interesting to me. Orlando is the half team. If spacing is the real issue in Orlando, just go get the guy who doesn't need any space. You know, it would be similar to going in Durant. It's like Kawhi could just get his mid-range shot off, and he just throws a forearm into somebody, he gets his space, and that's fine. But that doesn't, like, they would have to move off of like Franz or Paolo, and I don't see them doing that for Kawhi.
Yeah.
Two other teams that were interesting to me. Your Chicago Bulls and Washington. And the only reason I bring these teams up is because if we're going into this 3-2-1 lottery system, being bad isn't good anymore, right? You're at risk of getting relegated. And both of these rosters could potentially be really bad, especially in Chicago's case, where you're like, do you just need a guy who can steal you 10 wins a year that you otherwise weren't going to win? You stay out of that relegation zone, and you end up, even if you're sort of a middle of the pack team in the Eastern Conference, it's not as bad anymore, right? Like, we still have a pretty decent shot at getting a decent pick here. You get a big name in that market. That's good. There's an obvious need there for any kind of talent, but especially at that position that Kawhi plays in Chicago. I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know that they have the contracts to make it work, but they don't need it because they can offer the cap space, which I think the Clippers would be interested in. And then Washington is the other team here where it's like, okay, well, they're young. They got this pick. They also just traded for Trae Young and Anthony Davis. And if they want another veteran on that other spot, it's like, okay, you got your veteran center, you got your veteran point guard. Do you want a veteran wing? And do you just move a couple more of these pieces for Kawhi? I was a little surprised that they traded for Trae Young and then Anthony Davis, so I won't rule them out for Kawhi because they're obviously trying to get competitive in short order. So those are the other two teams I had.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting pitch for the Bulls because of their cap space. They can just go pay somebody. It's not an incredible free agent class, but I mean, I think if you go pay Peyton Watson, for instance, you can be the 6th worst team in the league and be in a good situation. So there's not a lot of reason for them to give up anything in a trade when they have that cap space and when few teams do. So I personally would not want them to do that. I also don't think it really fits the philosophy of the new front office, which I think is all going to be about taking things really slowly. Washington, I mean, like you said, they already have made these splashy yet dubious star trades recently, so it does fit their profile a little more. Moving Anthony Davis, who doesn't seem like he wants to be there, and then displacing his money with Kawhi's money. I mean, that does seem possible. I don't know why Kawhi would want to be there. But again, like we said, it doesn't really matter. He's in a contract year and he's just going to need to prove himself to make money again. So it's very interesting. But then, like, for Washington, don't you want to be focused more on development? Theoretically, Trae Young, it could be a good development centerpiece because he likes to pass a lot, right? I don't see how Kawhi Leonard would be good for development. He's not much of a passer. He's not much of a communicator or a leader or a mentor, right? So I don't know about those. I'm definitely curious to see what happens with him. I mean, honestly, if I was running a front office, I would stay the hell away from him because he did just have a miracle health season, but I would not bet on that happening again.
One other team that comes to mind here, and if we were trying to do like 2018 Raptors Redux, a team that could conceivably talk themselves into needing Kawhi, but also kind of doing the trade in order to get off of some long-term salary and then looking like geniuses. And this team won't look like geniuses. But if you're the Sacramento Kings, would you just be like, we'll give you Sabonis for Kawhi straight up? And if you're the Clippers, I don't see how you say no to that. Getting Sabonis and no draft picks probably is the best thing that you're going to get in return for Kawhi at this stage.
Yeah.
You have a conceivable need for him. We've seen Sabonis work with a point guard like Garland in the past with De'Aaron Fox. Like you could build something around that group. And then you obviously have the pick in this draft that you can use to build with too. And if you're the Kings, you say, okay, well, we get off that Sabonis money, who's under contract for $45 and $48 million over the next couple of years. Levine comes off of our books after this season. Hunter's off the books after this year, and DeRozan's off the books after this year. So by making this Sabonis trade, we can just walk away from Kawhi because obviously he's not going to re-sign in Sacramento unless he does. I mean, it is California still technically. But I don't think that would be the plan. And you're like, we can go into 2027 with a ton of cap space and starting fresh. And maybe that's our move. If you don't want to do Sabonis, you could still do like a Keegan Murray plus Malik Monk thing. Maybe there's like, maybe that's more interesting to the Clippers. And then you're getting off that big Keegan Murray contract, which doesn't look super awesome right now. But either way, you can kind of talk yourself into getting off of long-term money for Sacramento for a year rental of Kawhi. And then you got the Kawhi thing for a year. And that's at least interesting, which I don't think anybody in Sacramento would be confusing their team with interesting right now. So that's one other team that I could think of, but it's not easy. It's not easy to find the Kawhi landing spot here.
No, I mean, I think that the only reason I think the Clippers should be super motivated to trade him is if they think they can get something really good, or if this scandal stuff is just so much worse than even we think it is. To be honest, I think that scandal, just from a PR perspective, is I mean, it's kind of not that big of a deal. It is a really big deal, I think, in terms of the ethical morass of it, and certainly people who really follow the NBA closely care about it a lot. But it hasn't broken through to normal people, really. It's a little too complex. So I don't know that they need to run away from that, but maybe there's some kind of smoking gun that hasn't even come out yet, and they need to divorce from Kawhi as soon as possible. I don't know.
In terms of some other surprise trade candidates, I came up with a list of teams, like, because we talk about Giannis, we talk about Kawhi. The other one we haven't talked about is Ja Morant. It's a similar thing. I'm like, I don't really know the spot that works for Morant. We can kind of go through the similar exercise. I get maybe Phoenix, Minnesota, like these teams have all been mentioned. I don't know. We'll see. But I came up with a list of like the unexpected names that I think could potentially get moved here. We talked briefly about Donovan Mitchell. If he doesn't sign that extension, I just wonder what would happen. I just wonder if Cleveland might say, you know what, he's 29. Maybe now is the time to get out from this. He, all NBA guy. Maybe we just start shopping him. And if we feel like we can get a bunch of draft picks, we can rebuild. James Harden is our lead point guard in the short term. And we're kind of just we're going to bridge the gap to the Evan Mobley era. And we're going to do it by trading Donovan Mitchell. I just wonder if that's an avenue that the Cavs take. I would be a little surprised, but I just wonder if he doesn't sign that extension, what happens. The other guy that's in a similar... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, once you've already gone like over the bridge of trading Darius Garland for James Harden, why not go get Kawhi, right? Like you've already said that you like don't care about vibes right. As an organization. It's just like
Kawhi and Harden reunited in Cleveland, just like they imagined.
Sure. Why not? Yeah.
I wonder if Toronto would just circle back. Just be like, hey,
probably
we had some
not.
Good times.
But I did think about Masai right away because I think we'll get more to him in a minute.
Dallas would be interesting.
It would be, yeah.
The first name on my list is Devin Booker. And I just don't know, as fun as this Suns season was, and it was one of the best feel-good stories of the season. He's 29 years old, very expensive. They have no draft assets to actually get another guy to play with them. And if you're going to build through the draft, I think that's probably the right way is to develop these guys. But by the time those guys get good enough, Devin Booker is going to be too old. And maybe the idea here is just, hey, Devin Booker is a fan favorite. Let's just ride this out and we'll develop this stuff. And with the new lottery rules, maybe we'll get lucky in the draft over the next couple of years and strike gold. And the safer play is to just keep Devin Booker and hope for something to work out that way. Jordan Knott's a really good coach. We're just a perennial playoff team. We'll be okay. But part of me also just wonders, like, if you were going to trade Devin Booker, now would be the time to do it. Under contract, still below 30 years old. He's not the player that he was a couple of years ago, But I do think that depending on who you ask, people believe that he could potentially get back to being that level of player in the right environment. And if he's just asked to go make shots somewhere, he's really good at that. And I just wonder if Phoenix might start quietly scanning the market on, could we trade Devin Booker and get like a couple of first round picks back and really just start the rebuild kind of full hog. Like, we know we have a good coach. We feel good about that now. Like, we got the proof of concept with that done. We have some good young players now. But like, do we start shopping him a little bit just to see if we can put some juice in this rebuild right now? Because they're kind of just doing this dry rebuild right now. So Devin Booker is the first name that comes to mind. What do you think about that?
Detroit again. I mean, they
Great
just need a guy like that so badly. And I think that Devin Booker probably needs to be on a team with a lot of physical guys. He does strike me as, along with Trae Young and perhaps a few other people, who the league kind of moved past them a little bit, because skill is obviously still important in the NBA, but over the last few years, physicality, size, athleticism, what was it that the new Bulls president said? Slap has become really important. Size, length, athleticism, physicality. And so if you don't have those attributes, you better be on a team with a bunch of guys who do, right? So I think Devin Booker would be a great fit in Detroit. I have no idea how that would work financially, or if it even could, because I think he makes even more than Kawhi, and I didn't try to process.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, yeah. So I'm not sure it's actually all that plausible. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think Booker is kind of a guy who the league has moved past a little bit. His fit, again, would be on a very specific type of roster, a roster with a Devin Booker shaped hole. I don't know exactly how many of those there are right now. I just named one. I would have to.
Orlando's the other one.
Orlando, yes, yes. So that would be awesome, actually.
Yeah.
And
they
could make it work more easily, I think.
They've got those big. They've got a few big chunky salaries that they can move to Phoenix. Now they're not as, they depleted their draft assets with the Desmond Bane deal, but they still have something left there and some interesting young players. So if you're Phoenix and you don't necessarily want or can get the draft capital, and I don't think if they even traded Devin Booker that it's not going to be like a Desmond Bane return. They're not getting 3 or 4 first round picks back for him. But if you can get one and a couple of good young players, that's something maybe worth thinking about with Phoenix. Now, if I asked a Suns fan this, they'd probably be like, absolutely not. Like, he's a fan favorite. Right. But that's why, this would be a tough decision and ultimately why he's on the surprising player list. The other one is Joel Embiid, which might not be as surprising, but I just wanted to talk about him. Like, what are the Sixers really doing here? It just feels like they're going to be stuck with Embiid. This is the spot. Unless they are willing to come off of their own draft capital, I don't see where they send Embiid. Like, would Chicago or Brooklyn just absorb into cap space if it meant we were getting like 2 or 3 first-round picks to take on that salary for you? Maybe. I don't see Philly doing that, so he's a guy that feels like probably just stuck in Philadelphia, and maybe I think there's a version of it that works if everybody just sort of agrees that this is Tyrese Maxey's team now, and Embiid kind of goes into this next chapter of his career, which we've already started to see a little bit of, but that's my only thought on Embiid. The other guy I have here, Zion Williamson, quietly the healthiest season he's had in a really long time. Still really efficient. Also feels like New Orleans is ready to move on and kind of fully embrace the Fears and Queen era, and they have another pick here in the lottery. So I just wonder, is that a team that could start to shop Zion, knowing, okay, he's coming off of a healthy year. We'll probably get the most for him at this point. Let's just turn the page on this thing. I think Zion's a good player, and he's obviously a needle mover when he's out there. It's just, do you buy in on him being healthy now, or do you buy in on him being healthier in your system than he was in New Orleans, which might have been the worst place for him when you look at the history of that staff and what they aren't able to do for guys in Zion's position. So I don't know if I'm a team that misses out on Giannis or some of these other big names. Would I circle back on Zion and be like, half of our offer for Giannis, we'll pitch that to you for Zion?
How much does he make? That's the question. Because he's got all sorts of clauses in his contract, right?
Yeah, so he's got the weird guarantee thing. So you're absorbing that, and he is under contract for something like 40.
42 and then 44.
42.
So he's got 2 years left. I mean, it's a lot more digestible. I think that, like you said, he's been on the worst franchise for health in the league, basically, or one of the worst, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then despite that, he finally figured out how to get through a season. His game hasn't developed as much as you might want it to, and hit the physicality that he that is his extreme advantage over others is gonna decline. That's what happens, right?
Yeah.
But if you're looking to just get something, a little extra bit of force, and just physicality, right, over the next couple of years, I think he's a great fit for a lot of teams, actually. Of course, with both Devin Booker and with Zion Williamson, you have ownership being like, we're never moving on. We're really committed to these guys. But then there's all sorts of signs around that, where it's like, with Zion specifically, there's tons of signs around him, right, where it's like, okay, you might actually trade this guy. With Booker, it's more probably I don't know if there's as many signs, but yeah, with Zion, I would love to see him on a real team. I think his reputation has been in some ways earned, but in a lot of ways really unfair, and that nobody is really doing well with that franchise, and that's not a coincidence. So I would definitely like to see him on a new team, and I definitely think he could be a major difference maker. It's just a matter of what you would have to give up to get him. I think that New Orleans has been kind of shaky, obviously, under their new front office when it comes to transactions. So you might be able to. Trading for Zion might be like the best deal of the summer, if that's a possibility. But I hadn't even thought about that, to be honest. So I don't know where he would best fit or what you'd have to give up to give him.
Yeah, that it strikes me as a team that would probably try to swerve and just be like, you know what, we're really leaning into physicality and athleticism, and we don't really care about outside shooting as much as maybe some other teams do. Like, would Denver take a swing at Zion? A team like that. I don't know. One other name that I have here is Alperen Sengun. It just feels like that relationship was a little strained between him and Udoka at the end of the year. And does Udoka have enough swing with a relatively new owner where he says, look, Sengun plateaued a little bit. Our real, star of the future is Amen. Our maybe, we can't have two minus defenders with Reed Shepherd and Sengun that we're building around. We want to keep Kevin Durant here. Like, do we try to move Sengun and get maybe more of a defensive-oriented piece? Could they do their version, in other words, of like the Gobert trade, where it's like we're gonna ship out our center and we'll go get a defensive backbone here. That's something we're gonna try to do. That's the other name that's out there. If I'm a team that would be really interested in Sengun, I would at least call Houston and be like, would you move him? And here's what we have.
Yeah. I mean, he could be a potential centerpiece in the Giannis trade.
That's a good point.
Centerpiece as a player. The real get would be the picks, I think. But that was when there were Giannis trade noises around the deadline. The Sengun centered deal was kind of one of the things out there, right? I think that the fit with him and Udoka is really, really poor, and it definitely. I mean, a lot of people are wondering about Udoka as a coach at this point, right? Where it just doesn't seem like offenses under him have been nearly as effective as you would think they could be with their personnel. So that's something that he kind of has to answer questions about with the Rockets next season. Obviously, they went through a whole year without really a point guard. I don't know if Reed Shepherd is really a point guard, right? And they looked like a team without a point guard, right? But they weren't running stuff through Sengun as much, which is kind of the best version of having a point guard you can get with their personnel. He's probably their best passer. So it would, in that way, it would be a bad time for Houston to trade Sengun because they've suppressed his value basically by not using him correctly. I think that Houston basically has 1 year with this group to to try to make it right. I would be surprised if they did anything brash this summer. I think they want to give it one more year. I think they really believe that Fred VanVleet was going to be really important for them. And so I don't know, he's older, so we'll see how that goes. But I think that if they are able to move off of the Dorian Finney-Smith contract that they should have never signed, if they're able to dump that and then use that space to get another backup point guard or something, that it could look like a very different team.
Yep. Any names that you want to talk about that you're thinking about, or
Kyrie Irving?
Kyrie's the other one. Yep, that's another one.
I don't know exactly where he fits either. Definitely coming off a major injury. I'll always believe that he can score.
Yeah,
and that he can score in any setting, right? The highest level of difficulty. But you kind of have to be a team that is able to rest him for a lot of the year, right? And then really unleash him in the playoffs. So for a guy who makes, what does he make, like $40 million? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of a tough ask. But I definitely think that Masai will be looking, right? I don't know that.
Yeah, every time I ask people in Dallas, like they're like, no, all indications that they want to bring Kyrie back. I'm like, really? That seems really strange. I had him on my short list here. I think he would. I would be surprised if they moved him, but that's the list. I would be surprised if they moved these guys. So,
right.
Honestly, Houston kind of makes sense. Reunited with KD, they have enough. They have a high enough floor where they don't have to rely on him every single night, especially if VanVleet's available. That could make some sense there.
They could make a lot of sense. In terms of Kyrie and KD playing with some young guys, somebody should ask Jared Allen how that goes. I don't know that would be the best thing for their young guys, but if they're like, we got to win next year, then it's a good move for sure.
John Wilmes, RealGM.com, one of our favorites around here. Thanks so much for jumping on, man.
Thanks, man.